excited as we are. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are super excited that Max Wolter has agreed to join us again, opener weekend, for a State of the Chippewa Flowage presentation. He always has great information to share, and we appreciate that he is spending this time with all of us. So with that, I'll give it over to Max.
All right. You don't have to do that.
We're doing it for her, Max.
Oh, that makes more sense. That makes a lot more sense. Okay. I'm going to get out of my own ear here. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. This is the third or fourth year in a row now we've done this, and it's nice to be able to come and give you guys really fresh information on what's going on in the Chippewa Flowage. Unfortunately, the information is going to be too fresh this year. We were only able to get out on the water for the first time today. So I got off the flowage about 3 hours ago. I had to decide whether I wanted to eat dinner or update the slideshow with what we saw today, and I chose to eat dinner, so I apologize. But, hold on. We'll be okay. We have a lot we can talk about tonight still, okay? I had to be a smart ass and put a bunch of ice fishing photos up here. But obviously, we have avoided the ice fishing opener. We have lots of open water. We're just a few feet from full pool. Navigation's pretty good out there. We've been running around all over. Even the little pockets of ice that are here, I'd be willing to guess that a bunch of them are going to be gone before you wake up tomorrow morning, especially if you sleep in till like 1 o'clock. Then they'll definitely be gone. So, let's get started. Barb is going to be my assistant here today. Thank you, Barb. Can we give Barb a round of applause? All right, let's go. So, I put this together a couple weeks ago when I didn't think we'd have a chance to be out in the water. So I was looking for other topics. Is that going to go, Bart? Yeah. There we go. So here's all our spring fieldwork photos this year. Let's hit it again. We'll show the... Oh, yeah, that's the problem. So I couldn't show you what we've been up to this spring because we haven't had a chance to do much. We're right in the middle of our walleye survey out here. We'll be doing our muskie survey probably next week or the week after. I have all the stuff that I presented to you in 2017, but that's kind of old, so we're going to find some other stuff that we can talk about tonight that's still relevant, maybe going to help you catch fish, definitely going to tell you a lot about how we're managing the Chippewa Flowage here. So, we're going to talk about 3 different species groups here. We'll talk about walleye, we're going to talk about panfish, big discussion going on right now about whether we should change panfish bag limits. And then I got a lot of cool stuff to show you about muskie. Even though this isn't the muskie opener, I hope you guys can get excited about that. All right, here we go. So let's start with walleye. So here's my bullet points here. Yes, there are legal walleye out there, but there's a lot of small ones too, and that's a good problem to have. You want to have that strong farm system. You want to have a lot of fish coming up. We have some good young year classes right now. One of our best year classes is hitting legal size right now. And when we were out there today, we were seeing fish between 14 and 16 and a half that are likely 4-year-olds. Our fish from 2014, which is one of our better recent year classes. The other one you're going to see out there a lot is 12 inchers. And those are probably our 2-year-old fish that were born in 2016. So those are our 2 best classes. And that's what we're going to talk about here primarily with walleye is what year classes are out there and what do the year classes look like right now. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Barb. This is our recruitment history for walleye in the Chippewa Flowage. And recruitment means the number of new young fish coming into the system. And this is measured with fall electrofishing. So the number here doesn't necessarily mean anything to you guys. 100 per mile, what does that mean? Does that mean there's only 100 per mile of shoreline? No, there's a lot more. This is a relative measurement. It allows us to compare from year to year and from lake to lake. 100's a really good year class. 60 is a pretty darn good year class. 30 is about average for northern Wisconsin. You can see the Chippewa Flowage used to be way above average. We had big year classes routinely, and we had small year classes rarely. Look at how this has changed through time, and I'm going to throw a graphic up here that'll help you. Go ahead, Barb. It's not uncommon to see fish populations oscillating like this with their reproduction, where there's a couple good years and then a bad one, a couple good years and a bad one. And actually, it's the fish themselves sometimes that are impacting that. When you have a ton of walleye out there, they can cannibalize pretty heavily and suppress their own recruitment. The other thing that happens is when there's a lot of them out there, they can really chow down the forage base, and then there's not much food for the new young ones to eat. So that's why you see some bad year classes, followed by a good one, followed by a bad one. So we expect to see this up and down. What we don't like to see is this downward trend in the oscillation. And the Chippewa Flowage is not unique in the fact that it's had this. Virtually every lake across the region is starting to see this pattern. The really big year classes are becoming far less common. The gaps in between the good year classes are becoming bigger, So our peaks are getting less peaky and our valleys are getting more valley-like. And I don't mean to be political. I don't see this as a political issue at all, and that's why I'm comfortable bringing it up. But this is what climate change looks like, right? This is the conditions in our lake changing to become less favorable for walleye. As water warms, as water becomes more clear and we go through drought periods like we had here in the 2000s, very challenging for walleye. Species that do just fine with that are largemouth bass, and that's a big reason why we started to see the shift out here. Now, we have been able to do some things to counteract that. We've done some drawdowns that have brought back some modest year classes, and that's responsible for some of the fish that you're going to be catching here this weekend. But as you can see, it's nowhere near what we had in the good old days, right? Another thing that we've done in response to that, give me a click, Barb, is we've done a lot of stocking. And that was probably something that would have been unheard of in the Chippewa Flowage 30 or 40 years ago, that we would need to stock walleye. Look at how many walleye we had coming in naturally. Well, after going through enough of a slump, we finally started saying, yeah, we got to stock some fish. And that's a good Band-Aid. It's actually pretty darn effective in a lake like this. We get good returns on our stocked fish. That's not true everywhere, but you can see more often than not, we're stocking over 20,000 fish, sometimes over 60 and 70,000. And these are the extended growth fingerlings that are 6 to 8 inches long. So there's fish out there, but this pattern is troubling. And again, it's not unique to the Chippewa Flowage. In fact, a lot of other lakes have gone down and have started flatlining. So this is a big problem. It's one that we're going to continue looking at and seeing if we can find solutions to it. You're on one of the lakes with better walleye fishing in northern Wisconsin right now, so I won't be too negative. There's going to be a good fishing out there for walleye tomorrow. Go one more for me, Barb. As far as what's out there, I showed you this last year when we were out on the west side. This is our breakdown of the sizes. The shaded areas here kind of line up with the fishing regulations. So green is our harvest size fish. Red are our protected areas in the size limit. And then those are over 24 fish, which you can harvest one of as a part of your daily bag limit. So you can see that there's a pretty good proportion of keeper-sized fish on the west side as of last year. I expect that to be the case again this year. What we're seeing is that the west side tends to have more keeper fish because they grow a little bit faster over there. The fish on the east side are an inch or sometimes 2 inches behind the ones on the west side. So if there's a year class coming up, and over here you're only catching fish that are 14, 14 and a half, you may want to venture over to the other side of the bridge and you may find a few more keepers. But I think there's going to be keepers on both sides of the bridge this year in fairly good numbers. We saw quite a few today that were 15, 16, and 17. So they're out there. East side, well, I'll come back to you and give you the results of 2018 when we've got them all put together. So for now, that's going to be, Barb, throw up a big question mark for me. I can kind of tell you what we saw in the water, but I don't have any graphs or statistics put together. But generally speaking, it looks pretty good. I would be excited to be fishing out here tomorrow. That's all I got for walleye today, because I have a lot we want to talk about with panfish and muskies. So let's get into panfish, Barb. All right. The big topic, the big discussion on panfish right now is pressure and harvest. And the fishery has been so popular for such a long time now. There's so many people that are going out and taking advantage of it, both open water and ice fishing, that there's kind of this underlying sense that they can't handle the pressure. There's too much harvest going on. Is that true or not? That's why you have me. I'm a biologist. We can look at the biology and we can kind of try and get an answer to that question. And it's challenging for a big water body like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all the information we have on Chippewa Flowage panfish and kind of let you make up your own mind. I'm going to stay very neutral on this. I'm not going to push you towards any conclusion or another, all right? But here's what I would like to do. Let's poll the room really quick. Raise your hand if you think that the panfish bag limits on the Chippewa Flowage should stay where they are, 25. A few hands? Yeah. Okay. Raise your hand if you think they should be higher. No takers? All right. Raise your hand if you think the panfish bag limit should be lower. Okay, so I'm getting some more lowers than stay the same, and not many hires at all. I'm going to poll you guys again at the end. All right, here we go. Ready, Barb? Give me a couple. One more click. All right, so there's interest in changing the panfish bag limit. And that was initiated through the Conservation Congress, which some of you may be familiar with, some of you may not be, but that's the official advisory body to the Wisconsin DNR. Anybody can show up and vote on the proposals. You can even put forth your own proposal. And that's kind of how this conversation started. Somebody in Sawyer County put forth a proposal saying, I think we should lower the panfish bag limit on the Chippewa Flowage. And the Conservation Congress pretty overwhelmingly supported that and said, yes, let's advance that idea, let's explore that. It doesn't mean it's a done deal, it means that it's being looked at. There's kind of two options when you're looking at reducing harvest on panfish. You can reduce the bag limit, or you can use a length limit. Each have their pros and cons. Length limits, especially in a system where you're trying to manage for a lot of crappies, have some pretty major cons that are going to prevent us from probably looking at this as an option. It sounds really nice to say that we could just put a 10-inch size limit out there, and before long all the crappies would be over 10 inches. But you run some pretty serious risks of a lot of those fish not making it to the size limit, frustrating anglers, and actually reducing what people can harvest somewhat unnecessarily. And that's particularly risky when you have a predator population that's in flux, like our walleye have been. So we're not even going to have length limits as a part of the conversation today. We're going to X that out, and we're going to talk about reduced bag limits primarily. Give me one more, Barb. Now, before we get too far talking about panfish, it's important to note that we do have goals for panfish on the Chippewa Flowage, and we have a management plan for all the fish species out there. It was put together in 2007. It's got a goal for panfish that says a population of moderate density with a moderate proportion of preferred size fish. Does that mean anything to anybody? It does to me, but I'm going to help interpret this, okay? So we got that from stakeholders who came to these meetings and told us what kind of fishery they wanted. And what they were saying is, when it comes to panfish, they want to catch a fair amount. They want to see that bobber going down. Nobody wants to go crappie fishing and catch 2 a day. You know, it's not like walleye or muskie fishing. They want to eat what they catch. We value panfish as a harvest species pretty much throughout the state, right? Certainly there are trophy pan fishermen, but they are enough of a minority that we are managing primarily for harvest. And we want the size to be at least average. And these goals are all compatible with each other. We couldn't say that we want exclusively 14 to 16 inch crappies and we want to be able to harvest every one we catch. It can't be done. It just cannot be done. You would have to restrict harvest to the point where nobody's keeping anything to get crappies that big. And you'll understand that more in a moment. So we have these goals. And that translates to things that we want to see in the fishery. So we have both abundance and size objectives, and these are based on our surveys. So when I'm out there on the lake tomorrow, I'm going to be checking in on these to see how our panfish populations look. For crappie, we want to see 10 to 20 per net when we're out there doing a survey. And we want 20 to 40% of those to be over 10 inches. For bluegill, when we're shocking, we want to see 50 to 100 per mile, which is not super high, and we want to see 5 to 15% of those being over 18 inches. And that translates to a fairly high quality panfish. What did I say? 6 inches? 18. 18? That would be the definition of a bad objective, because we will never accomplish it. So thank you for catching me. 8 inches. So if you're out there crappie fishing, if you catch 10, 4 of them should be over 10 inches according to this. All right? So we can check in on this. So let's look at how we've been doing lately. This is abundance for both crappie and bluegill. And perch are going to be the forgotten panfish here. We just don't have a lot of good data on perch for me to show you tonight. So we're going to focus primarily on crappie and bluegill. And those are the top 2 species that people are targeting out here when they're pan fishing anyway. So what you're seeing here is how the abundance jumps around on both the west side and the green bars and the east side and the red bars. And these blue shaded areas are our objective. So this is all from our surveys. So you can see with crappies, recently we have either been in or slightly above our objective. And if we have to be above or below, I would prefer to be above. So that's that. For bluegill, we were way above our objective. And that's a problem, because then when you have so many bluegill, you don't have very good size. So we want to bring that abundance down and get the size up. And you'll see how that works in a moment. So we were able to get that down through a variety of methods. One was the drawdown. The drawdown knocked down bluegill numbers a little bit. The other thing was getting more walleye out there. They're a very effective predator on bluegill. When you have a good predator population, you get your panfish under control, and then they can grow, and you start getting bigger ones. So let's go to the next slide, Barb, and look at the size. Crappies here in kind of the gray, purple, I don't know what that is, and bluegills here in the red with their corresponding size objectives. So we want to see 20 to 40% of our crappies being over 10 inches. You can see we're kind of bouncing around the bottom end of that range for quite a while. In the last couple of years, we shot up. Bluegill, kind of the same story. We were flatlining. We did not have many bluegill over 8 inches, and that was when the abundance was really high. We started getting that abundance down. Now the 8-inch bluegill starts showing up. So when you look at our fisheries management plan and our goals and objectives for how many should be out there and how big they should be, we're kind of right where we want to be. All right? So I'm going to kind of go Jekyll and Hyde on you here. I'm going to give you good news and bad news. Ready? Here we go. Now I'm going to freak you out with statistics about how many get harvested out here. This data is a little bit dated. It's from 2011 when we did a big creel survey of everybody fishing out on the Chippewa Flowage. We interviewed thousands of anglers. We checked live wells. We tabulated all this and we estimated how much total fishing was going on.
What about ice fishing?
Hold on, I'll get to ice fishing. There's 186,000 hours spent fishing for crappies. 186,000 hours. 161,000 for bluegill, and you can see perch here were not super popular at the time. I would expect they've probably become a little more popular since 2011 because the population's been improving. Over 1 million panfish caught. Of those, 156,000 crappies harvested, 197,000 bluegill harvested. And those numbers look terrifying until you put in context of this giant water body. 10.2 crappies per acre, 12.9 bluegill per acre. What would be a really useful piece of information would be knowing exactly how many crappies and bluegill are out there per acre, so we can know the percentage that were harvested. That's a very, very challenging thing to do. We only even do it for walleye once every 10 years. Doing it for something as abundant as bluegill would be a monumental task. So we don't have that, but we can look at other lakes where it's not uncommon to see bluegill populations where there's 200, 300, 400 per acre. So there's a lot of panfish out there. This is what's getting harvested. We're going to play trivia quickly. You guys ready? Panfish harvest trivia. So you can shout out an answer to these questions, and we'll see if anybody can get close. Ready? Barb, don't press that button until we have some answers in, okay? According to our creel survey in 2011, and this is open water anglers, what is the average number of panfish harvested per angler that's out there targeting panfish?
In a year?
No, in a day. In a day, sorry. In a day. At the end of their trip.
12.
Only on the flowage. 12, 15, 15, 25 is the average? That would mean nobody caught less than 25.
21.
21?
Kept or caught?
Kept. Harvested.
6.
6 from Rick Marks.
10.
10.
People are.
All right, Barb, let's show them. 5. 5. And this number and the next one are going to be numbers that are going to be very hard to believe if you are a good angler. And probably everybody in this room is a pretty good angler. If you're spending your Friday night listening to a fish biologist talk, you probably really like fishing, okay? So you are an above average angler, congratulations. When we do creel surveys, and you can talk to our creel clerks, there are a shocking number of people out there that have no idea what they're doing. They're either out there to drink beer, or they're out sitting over 30 feet of water with 2 feet under a bobber and using like a 2-aught hook to try and catch bluegill. There are tons of people that catch and harvest no panfish. There's a lot of people that release panfish voluntarily, and when you add up all the people fishing and what they're harvesting as an average, it's 5. So that puts these numbers in even more context. Look at all these panfish leaving, hundreds of thousands of panfish leaving, 5 at a time. What percentage of anglers get their full bag limit of panfish open water on the Chippewa Flowage? This was 2011. What percentage?
2.
2. 1. You guys seem to have calibrated a little bit based on the first answer. What if I'd said that one first? What would you have said? Be honest. Yeah, go ahead, Barb. You guys were ringing right around it. 1.5. 1.5% get their full bag limit. There's a lot of people that stop before they get there. They're catching more fish, but they're letting them go voluntarily. We're seeing a lot more of that. People regulating their own harvest, even though the bag limit would allow them to take more. So these two numbers tell you a lot about what is going on out there with harvest. It's not that there are a few people that are taking a ton. It's that there's a ton of people taking a few, and that's very common in fish management. And that makes it more challenging to regulate harvest. What am I going to do? Am I going to put 3 bag limit out there so that we can actually, protect some of these fish? It's part of the discussion. What percentage of crappie are harvested through the ice in Wisconsin? This is not specific to the flowage. This is the whole state of Wisconsin. I don't have it just for the flowage. I'm sorry. What percentage of all the crappies harvested come through a hole in the ice? 3%, 15%, 35%. If there's prizes, I think this gentleman here at the table is going to be doing pretty well tonight. Barb, 32%.
Wow, it's still growing, the price is right.
32%. So, what we tend to see, if you look at differences between open water anglers and ice anglers are more efficient. They tend to be a little bit more serious anglers. There aren't as many casual people that are just going out on the ice. It's not as much fun. It's miserable. So ice anglers are probably taking more per person, but there are far fewer ice anglers, so they end up taking a minority of the crappies that are harvested. What about for bluegill? Let's put the same one up there. You're my guy tonight.
15.
15? Okay. Somebody might be able to beat him on this one. 25? That's pretty good. Let's go with that. 23%. So relatively close between the two panfish species is what I would expect. So thank you for playing trivia. You all are winners. All right, here we go. Moving on, Barb. More numbers that are going to scare the crap out of you. Mortality. Mortality is a fisheries term for the number of fish that die between 1 year and the next. And these are adult fish. And we can estimate this based on the ages that we see out there in the population and basically how quick a year class disappears and turns to nothing. You know, there aren't 60-year-old crappies in the flowage anymore. They're all dead, right? That's an extreme example, but if you look back, you can see how they start to peter out. 62.6% of crappies die every year. 43.3% of adult bluegill die every year. Why? That's a good question. And that's what's tricky. We know a lot of them are harvested, but we don't know exactly how much of that makes up for this percentage. There's a lot of other awful things that can happen to a panfish. You're at the bottom of the food chain. You've got predators, you've got parasites, you've got diseases, you've got winter kill, you've got starvation, and guess what? You can die of old age too because you're not immortal. So natural, what's that?
What size do you consider adult?
For bluegill, we're looking at about 5 inches, and for crappies, we're looking at about 8 inches. So, there's a lot of awful things that can happen to a panfish. And as a fish biologist, I look at these numbers, and they are a little bit higher than average, but they're still within the normal range. It's not uncommon at all to see panfish populations with this level of mortality. What this does tell us, though, is you're not going to get 14 or 15-inch crappies in a lake with this amount of mortality. It can't happen. If you are a 10-inch crappie and it's going to take you 8 years to get to 14 inches, which is a realistic amount of time, you have a 62% chance of dying every single year. That very quickly decays down to a less than 1% chance. So, that explains a lot about the size on the Chippewa Flowage. The question is, would a bag limit reduce these enough to actually improve size or maintain the size we have, which is perhaps, you know, a more common explanation for why people want to reduce bag limit. It's not to improve it, it's just to keep what we got. Let's go, Barb. So what would reducing a bag limit, oh, not too much, thank you, but one more, but there, thank you. So what would reducing a bag limit do? Well, we've done it a bunch of places. This wouldn't be the first place the bag limit was reduced, so we have a pretty good idea of what happens. It's a fairly proven way to increase size, but don't expect the moon. You get about 1 inch on average. And that's been pretty well shown with bluegill. Crappie studies are a little less common, but based on our growth rates out here and the amount of mortality we have, I predict that we would be in the same ballpark. You get about 1 inch on average. So if our average size crappie is about 9.4 inches, which is what it is right now, the average might move up to about 10.4 inches. Reducing the bag limit on the Chippewa Flowage to 10, based on our 2011 data, would impact about 20% of Chippewa Flowage panfish anglers. 20% of y'all that are keeping more than 10 panfish on an average day. There's a lot of people that are actually keeping less than that. And this is, again, per person. So if you're in a boat with 4 people and you're only keeping, got to do math here, 32 panfish, you wouldn't be impacted by that at all, would you? Nope. So it would decrease the number of harvested panfish by about 18%. So if we went back to that 197,000 crappies harvested, or was that bluegill? Crappies harvested, that would go down by 18%. That's how many fish we